All right, and welcome to my first stream. Welcome to Agile Coaching Open Exchange. The idea of this channel is essentially to get in contact with you guys and discuss a few things. I have thoughts about topics such as which we are trying today, the change curve from Kübler Ross. But yeah, at the end of the day, for now, and probably until a few of you are joining, I'll be pretty alone here, which is fine. So let's start with something which occupies us if we are in a change program, transformation program, but also it belongs to one of the, let's say, basics you might have learned in your trainings around change in general, change management, how people react to change, etc. A very long time back, I was introduced to the change curve by a podcast I was randomly hearing from Kübler Ross, and well, it was described that the change curve as such is stemming from, let's say, how people die. So she mentioned it in one of her publications, which is called On Death and Dying in 1969. And essentially she interviewed quite a few people when they were given the message that they will have to die because their body is suffering from a severe medical issue, and thus they will have to die. And she observed how these people went through several stages, and this is where this change curve essentially started. So it looks a bit like this. You basically have various stages, and one of them is shock. And I mean, it's quite obvious if you hear this for the first time. Then, yeah, you're shocked. You may be paralyzed. The next one was denial, then frustration, depression, experimentation then happened. Yeah, and that basically is that people are starting to sort of get used to the idea that this is going to happen to them. Yeah, so they start to experiment around. Yeah, so yeah, I think essentially that's what happens here. Experimentation state. Then they're making a decision. They learn how to cope with the new situation, and last but not least, they're integrating this information into their, let's say, current state of life. And the thing here is, on the one hand, we have time over here. Apparently this is much larger, and we have morale and competence on this one here. Yeah, so this is where this, let's say, the morale is running along. And so at the beginning, this looks a bit like this, yeah, that graph, and it essentially means after a down on that information, people are starting to come up again, to get back to a normal state. And right now, when you're going through a change program, a transformation, more often than not, this change curve is being mentioned as sort of the phases also people go through when being introduced to organizational change. Yeah, so one example is you're introducing Scrum to people. Yeah, or you're introducing a new boss or even a team member, and then that means change for people. You're changing rules, you're changing processes, and people go through this. And I mean, Kübler Ross, when she invented it, she also mentioned that this is not necessarily the stages you're always following in that sequence. So you might skip a sequence, you might stay for a longer period of time in a particular section of this graph. You might also go back and forth, yeah, between frustration, denial, depression, experimentation, etc., etc. You might fall completely back into this hole, even once you seem to be out of it. And so it's not linear. What you could think about it is a bit like a list. Yeah, they are most likely emotions or states of mind you're in when, let's say, a severe change happens for you. I doubt, though, a little bit that organizational change always follows that pattern, or is even where it's even applicable. I mean, I would say, most evidently, in comparison to how we are using it today in organizational change, but she evidently was having interviews with people, and this is what she observed. Yeah, and I would say this has a certain basis, yeah, to be at least be taken into consideration for people. And I think it's been used in so many different ways these days, in particular in psychology and how people deal with very shockingly events. So probably that's fine. What I don't really support is that we are taking this thing now and that we're bringing it to our organizational change. If someone is, due to the organizational change, losing his job, or potentially losing his job, or with high likelihood losing his job, he might go through a similar curve. But really the question is, between the death note being handed to you, potentially losing or for a matter of fact losing your job, or being maybe uncertain about your future, so you might think that you might lose your job whilst there's no one told you so. Yeah, it is simply a change which comes along. You wonder how your future job life will look like, and essentially it might be that you are losing your job. But it's something you always have. Let's say this particular person always has this. When someone says, oh, we're a 5,000 people company, we'll let 5 people go, that this person feels always somehow under this pressure, and etc. So also there, I wonder if that person, for instance, ever gets to the decision, experimentation, and integration phase, yeah, or whether this person is going daily between depression and shock and denial and frustration. So what I'm trying to say is, we can take this, but we have to take it not only with a pinch of salt, but with a proper spoonful of salt, and assume, yeah, people might undergo, let's say in my current DevOps transformation, where certain things are happening to people, or are a bit more clearer than just an assumption or paranoid behavior, that there's going to be impact to them, that they might feel some of this. I doubt, for instance, that any one of them feels shock. Yeah, there might be one person, but it doesn't. I'm high doubts that out of 20 who are impacted, everyone is in a shock state. I would wonder. I didn't see denial. I couldn't observe in frustration. Yeah, for sure. A glimpse of depression, maybe. But what I also saw is fear. Yeah. So when we go to emotions, what I saw is fear and some form. It's not paralysis, but it brings people to a state then to, let's say, use the kitchen a bit more frequently in order to utter their concerns about their potential future. So this is what I mostly observe. This is what I mostly hear, that people are uncertain or not convinced. Yeah. So this is where we maybe are in some form of denial state. I'm not sure. But they are also not convinced because of the reason saying, I personally had a perfect life before that. My job was perfect. My team is perfect. Or when you are a team lead and your team seem to be perfect, then you observe that you are doing a good job, that they are doing a good job. And why is that change coming now along? So does it really fit? I have my doubts. So yeah, this is basically the change curve. Still, I think useful for people under extreme emotional circumstances, and it's still useful to mention that it's allowed to feel that way. First of all, yeah, that the emotions which are connected towards yourself are probably valid. Yeah, I mean they're valid as soon as you utter them. Yeah, so if someone feels like this, then that's how we can take it, and we can also assume that there are people reacting quite drastically towards changing environments. And this is what I wanted to discuss today. It was the first attempt. Thanks for watching this. There is much more, by the way, to the change curve than what I just said. I'm pretty sure you can read it up on the Wikipedia to get an early glimpse, or find a podcast where they're talking about it a bit more often. At the end of the day, maybe one last thing is, when you're watching that someone is in that stages and is going through them due to your organizational change, some of our let's say, from a management point of view, from someone who's not in that situation, we can help people who are in that situation to get through this. Because there's one really important aspect, and that is, organizational change is normally not made for the purpose of saying, we do something and we'll let it die and it will cease to exist. Normally we transform really from one state to the next state, and we believe that the new state will be better, from various points of view. If you're doing an agile or DevOps transformation, the assumption often is, at least that's what I've observed, that people are working much more efficient once it's done. And of course they won't, as long as they are in one of the phases where they're still uncertain, they doubt that it will work, that they are discussing it most of the time in the kitchen, that they are maybe frustrated about the change, or depressed, denying. At the end of the way, they're not working with the new model, but working against it. And of course, even if you have done the change successfully, then you're through, you have all your rituals in place, etc. But if people are still stuck in that denial phase, then you have to do something about it, because whatever the benefit is of your change, it will never really come to existence if the people which are now in the, let's say, in parts of the change curve where they need to get out are stuck. When they're stuck in a depression, frustration, and denial state, you won't get any potential benefit out of your change. All you get is noise. And how do you get them out of that status? So I think it's quite different to each person, but at least knowing that these stages do exist and that they might be in some or similar emotional states like the ones depicted here, can help finding the right, let's say, first of all, tune in, listen to what gets out of them, what vibes you're receiving. Does it connect to any of these emotions? Job loss, fear, not wanting to change the way of working, lack of confidence in being able to work in the new way. So basically they have maybe 30 years of experience working in the current way, and they pretty much feel they are put far outside their comfort zone with the new approach. So they would do it, but they need some form of support saying you're allowed to learn, you're allowed to make mistakes, and if you're on the journey, you're going to be of value to the company. I mean, this because you bring a lot of experience in, and your experience will still be of benefit. I mean, it's not only, of course, always fact-based technical information you've sucked up in the last 30 years, but there's ways how you learned and ways how you taught people, and life experience at the end of the day. So making sure that people feel addressed with their concerns, and then getting them through the change curve, helping them getting through the change curve, and at the end of the day then start working efficiently with the change. So now it did take slightly longer than I thought it would take.